someplace. I want you to just sketch out really quick 3 different cardiac cycles. 3 different cardiac cycles. I want you to sketch out what it's going to look, what your EKG is going to look like. If number 1 is your pacemaker, number 2 is your pacemaker. What will the EKG look like if number 1 is your pacemaker, number 2 is your pacemaker, or number 3 is your pacemaker? Okay, give me more information. Shorter. I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm wanting to understand what's happening electrically.
You have a signal going both ways out.
Okay, so there's a firing. So I'm just going to try to say what it is that you're saying as we go. Right? So hold on. Let me get myself drawn in here. Okay, so we're starting with a pacemaker site right there.
Okay.
So you're saying it's going to fire and the signals are going to go both directions.
Right.
So you're going to go into the atria and continue into the AV node. Right. Great.
Yes. And the one that's going into the atria is going to be a negative reflection.
Okay.
Deflection.
Because why?
Because it's going away from the camera.
Okay.
In lead 2.
In lead 2. And then as that's going up, the other one's still traveling through the AV node, and it's delayed as it's going through, as it usually would be.
Okay, so you're telling me I'm going to have a negative deflection,
Yes.
and that's what's happening in the atria.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And you're still getting your normal delay going through, but because it's starting at the AV node, at basically the top of the AV node, and it's being delayed as it's going, instead of being delayed all the way down, you're not really going to have the PR interval that you would usually see is going to get buried by the.
What do you mean by buried?
You're going to get a QRS complex right here, and
Right
it's
where?
right at the very end of there.
Right here?
Yep.
Okay. What's that QRS complex going to look like?
Normal.
I think it's going to just start climbing straight up.
What?
It would look normal.
Give me information about what it can look like. Is it going to look normal? Is it going to look abnormal? Is it going to be strange?
I think it's going to look normal.
Okay. So I can draw just any normal QRS complex. Is this okay?
Yes.
All right.
And then it's going to continue out to a T wave that's normal, and then start again. The Q, I mean, unless there's pathology going on, would have been at a baseline. Even if there is a pathology, you may not be able to actually see it in there.
Okay, so people agree or disagree with what James has drawn up here?
I agree.
What I've drawn based on his description.
I agree.
You don't disagree? With my pacemaker site being right here? So I have a pacemaker site at the beginning of the AV node. Right? I have a pacemaker site at the beginning of the AV node right here. We know that autorhythmic cells, as well as contractile cells, are all locked to each other with gap junctions in between. And those gap junctions are bidirectional, right? So therefore the pacemaker goes off and it sends the signals both directions. One signal is going up into the atria across all of these pathways, right? And one signal is going down to continue on through the AV node. The signal that is going up into the atria has no delay to it. It's just going from cell to cell. So in essence, we have exactly what we have with the SA node firing. We just have it in reverse. It's starting from the AV node and going backwards. So our P wave will be very similar, but opposite in terms of direction as what it would look like with the SA node. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Assuming that we are looking in which camera right now?
Lead 2.
We're looking at which camera?
Lead 2.
Lead 2. Okay, assuming that we're looking in the lead 2 camera right now. Do we agree with the P wave like that? Okay. There's nothing wrong with the AV node. I didn't note to you anything being wrong with the AV node. I just told you where the pacemaker site was, right? So as that signal starts going through the AV node is doing with that conduction what it always does with that conduction, which is to do what?
Slow it down.
To delay it, right? So it gives it a moment of time to delay. So as soon as that signal leaves this pacemaking site and heads down into the AV node, it is in its delay. Now, under normal circumstances, the AV node gets it right about here and takes it to right about there, right? In other words, the SA node fires, it travels down the atria and the atrial pathways, and then gets to the AV node, right?
Okay.
The AV node then delays it, and then sends it, delays it to about there, then sends it into the bundle branches and the Purkinje fibers before it gets to the ventricles. That's normal. This is normal, right? Yes?
Mm-hmm.
So what we have over there is that this AV node delay is still happening and is still happening normally, but instead of being offset by the time it takes for the SA node to get the signal down through the pathways to the AV node, in this case, the delay starts immediately. So my AV node delay starts right there. Does that make sense? Because my AV node delay starts immediately, I've now lost this time in my PR interval. It's not there anymore. I'm that much closer to my QRS complex. Right?
We still have roughly the same amount of time to go.
Yeah, I
through
thought
the
that it
bundle and
started
Purkinje fibers, so
from
whatever
west
that distance is,
Uh-huh.
and then normal would be the same distance in.
Yeah, give or take. Yeah. Right? So therefore, I will have a PR interval that is incredibly short. And in some cases, it might be tucked right up against the QRS complex. That completely depends on exactly where that pacemaker site is, right? If that pacemaker site was here versus there, versus there, versus there, versus here, right? I'll have some slight differences. But my PR interval is certainly going to be short. Now, what's happening to my QRS complex?
Nothing. It's the same.
Nothing. Yeah, my QRS complex should be the same for that patient, right? I shouldn't see anything change about my QRS complex because my QRS complex is all related to what? Ventricular depolarization. Ventricular depolarization is based on the depolarization of what just before it? Purkinje fibers. The Purkinje fibers are depolarization is related to the depolarization of what just before that?
The bundle of his.
The bundle branches.
Bundle
And the
branches.
bundle branches depolarization is contingent on the depolarization of
The bundle of his.
the bundle of His, and bundle of His is where the branch happens. So as long as that signal happens above the branching of the bundle branches, then the signal into the bundle branches will be the same. Therefore, the bundle branches to Purkinje fiber firing will be the same. Therefore, the Purkinje fiber to the ventricles firing will be the same, and the QRS complex is the ventricles. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I shouldn't see anything strange or different about the QRS complex. And if I don't see anything strange or different about the QRS complex, what else should I not see anything strange or different about?
The P wave.
T-wave. Does that make sense?
Wait, did you say P or T?
T.
T.
T-wave. Good. So what I have here is I have an inverted P wave when I'm looking in the lead 2 camera. I've got an inverted P wave that comes before the QRS complex. It's called an antegrade P wave. Antegrade because it comes first. Does that make sense? An antegrated inverted P wave. And this is one of the first looks of our cardiac cycles of a junctional rhythm. Right? Okay. Pacemaker site 2. What is pacemaker site 2 going to make it look like? Anyone want to give a stab at that one?
So it would look similar, but the half of the P wave would be buried in the QRS. So the QRS would start at the bottom of the inverted P wave. And so it would look like a wide QR.
Do we agree, disagree? So talk me through it just a little bit. So we
So
have this going on here. pacemaker site is right here.
Uh-huh.
Talk to me about what's happening when that site fires.
So that site fires, and the signal's gonna travel both directions. And it's going to be delayed as it travels,
Delayed where? In which direction?
in both directions.
Good. Does that make sense so far? We're gonna fire from here, but because we're somewhere in the middle of the AV node, the signal is getting delayed both directions, because it has to get through those convoluted channels both ways. Okay? Good? Go on.
So, but as it goes down, it also has to travel through the bundle of His, which is gonna delay it longer than going up. So there's more delay down than up. So the P wave will fire
Is there a delay in the bundle of his?
No.
What do you mean by delay?
Farther the travel?
length,
Okay, so
length
just
of time.
Okay. Let's stay away from the word delay.
Okay.
I made a mistake when I was using the word delay before,
Takes more
because I want you to think
just-
physiologic delay within the AV
It
node.
just takes,
Takes more time.
so if it's in the AV node and right in the middle, the time to travel to the top and bottom of the AV node should be the same, but the distance to travel to fire off the ventricles at the bottom of the AV node through the bundle branches in the Purkinje would take longer than to fire off the atria.
Okay.
So you would see the inverted P wave first, but it wouldn't take as long for the full P wave to go. So halfway through the P wave, the ventricle would fire. So you would have the start of that P wave, and then as it goes down, you would have the QRS.
You describing something like this?
Something like that, but
Yep, I agree with that.
but would the QR look wider because of the, I mean, it wouldn't be wide, but would it,
QR, I don't know what you mean by that.
between the Q and the R,
Who says we have a Q wave at all?
where the Q wave would be, because it's buried in the inverted P. So would it make it look,
If we have no Q wave, then it wouldn't necessarily make it wider.
okay.
We don't always have a Q wave.
I didn't know if it would, because it would be buried, make it look wider.
It's a good question.
If you,
Right.
I agree it's buried.
if you had one.
If you
Running
had-
the assumption that when the signal starts in the AV node, that it's gonna take the same amount of time to travel to both ends. Those two signals would cancel each other out, so you wouldn't actually see a P wave. Or you wouldn't see a negative or positive deflection to start with.
So you're suggesting something like this?
Wait, say that again, Chandler?
Yes, but not entirely. So so the initial would be flat because your negative and positive deflection are gonna be canceled out through the AV node. But then once you hit the top of the AV node,
Wait.
you will have a downward deflection for the atria. But once you hit the bundle of His, your normal QRS segment, your QRS segment will be normal.
So how is it different than what I drew there, based on what you just said?
I don't understand what you're meaning by cancel each other out.
So you don't see a signal traveling.
I don't think the one that you just drew will go into the QRS. I think it will be literally right next to it, but I don't think the QRS segment is affected by it.
So you just have no P wave.
There's just no, there's no interval between the P wave and the QRS. It will literally be a downward
Isn't that what I
deflection.
drew right there?
Yeah, but without there's a little bit of a delay in that one, in my opinion. Where
You mean there's a little
So you think
PR
you'll
segment
see
there?
an entire P wave before that QRS complex? I think.
Wait, why would you see a Q wave at all?
Because you're still gonna have electrical signal from the top of the AV node back up, so you still have to have some sort of downward deflection. But it's gonna be so close to the QRS that there won't be a delay, but the QRS segment will be normal.
So you're arguing that you'd rather have something closer to this than this, but something still somewhere.
Correct.
But really, it's all this different, it's all technical of how exactly where you're drawing in AV.
Okay?
What's
It's
that?
very nice that it depends on if it's equidistant.
What?
But yours would be within the QRS complex.
Yeah, I think that P wave would be buried in the QRS.
I agree with Mark.
Which is kind of what I had there.
Yeah. Or a combination of.
The-
Where you don't see
the-
the Q, where you don't see the P wave.
No, I think you would see the beginning of a P
Which
wave.
I have right there.
Yes.
Okay.
No, you wouldn't see a P wave because it's,
Why wouldn't you see the beginning of a P wave?
because you have, the signal starts in the middle of the AV node, so any signal that you see coming down and any signal that you see going up are gonna be equidistant in terms of positive and negative deflection, yet they're happening at the same time and they're being delayed the same amount of time, so there should be no deflection at all.
But,
You don't see
but we
signal.
don't, exactly, we don't see the signal traveling through
AV and the septum and all
the
that.
AV and the septum and the pathways. We see the contractile cells.
Why don't we see it initially? Because it's buried in normal cardiac cycle.
Not
We
strong
don't
In,
see it.
in a normal cardiac cycle, we don't see the signal that goes through any of those pathways. We see the contractile cells.
So you have to wait till they get to the.
We don't
contractile.
see the SA node fire. We don't see the AV node fire. We don't
the
see,
signal.
No, you
we don't see the signal.
Well, then how do you get pulseless electrical activity?
What are you seeing then?
Or not?
You're
That's
seeing the
cool.
contractile.
You don't have to
You're
answer
seeing the
that.
wave.
That's
You're seeing the
fine.
wave of electricity passing through the contractile muscle.
This is kind of an important
More
thing
of
for
it.
you guys to grasp right here, so you guys need to argue this out pretty well. This is important.
Yeah, there's more contractile cells, so that's what you're seeing. You're seeing
Let me
the.
ask you a question. Do you or do you not see any electrical activity going through the AV nodes?
You don't. That's your PR segment. Where what Corey
Is
just
there
had.
any electrical activity
Yes.
going through the AV nodes?
Yes,
Right
there's not
there.
enough for you to see.
Look right there next to Corey's
Because
left
we
shoulder.
can't see it because it's not amplitude enough, or because it's
Look
buried in
at
something
the
else?
look at the picture right next to Corey's shoulder.
It's buried in there.
The start of it's buried in there. The end of it is not buried in there.
Because it's already done. Now it's in the
No, the signal right there is still traveling through that asystole of the PR segment.
What are
Don't
we
use
even
the word
arguing
system.
against?
The baseline. and
Baseline.
the
Baseline.
After the AV delay.
The flat.
The two arrows represents the bundle of his, the Purkinje fibers, all that junk until it gets to the ventricles.
Let's draw each of the individual things for a moment that we're gonna see. Tell me what the SA node is gonna look like when it fires, and I'll draw it. Here's the
A
SA
line.
node.
A
Here's what
line.
we're gonna see on the EKG when the SA node fires, and I'm only looking at the SA node itself. What's it gonna look like?
A line.
Straight line,
Here's what the atrial pathways are gonna look like.
a lump.
A straight line.
Here's what the atrial
Oh,
contractile cells are gonna look like.
gotcha.
A
lump.
P wave.
Here's what the AV node is gonna look like.
The PR segment.
Here's what bundle branches are gonna look like.
Straight line.
Same thing.
Here's what the Purkinje fibers are gonna look like.
Even shorter.
Here's what the ventricle contractile cells are gonna look like.
The QRS.
And then T wave for
Why?
that.
Because the.
'Cause we read-
cells depolarizing for those auto-arrhythmic cells in the SA node and the AD node and all this stuff. It's not enough electrical activity to register on it.
Right, so when I look at the EKG here, that's my SA node, right there, right?
Yes.
That's my atrial contractile cells, right? This is my AV node, which I don't see. That's my bundle branches. That's my Purkinje fibers. And that's my ventricular contractile cells. Right?
I agree with all of that.
Do you agree with all that?
That's the reason I think it would be
Good,
flat on
but what you said was not in agreement with this, just FYI. You were saying that you
I
would,
may have been saying it incorrectly. I believe that
in the AV node, you were saying that this versus this cancels itself on the EKG, but you wouldn't see any of that anyway. Because you won't see any activity in the AV node on an EKG. We don't have sophisticated enough equipment to pick up that electrical activity.
So my statement of being flat was correct.
Well, but
Just incorrectly.
And when students take tests, grandparents die. Okay, so,
Yeah, I still don't understand why you would have pulseless electrical activity on an EKG if you're telling me that none of the EKG is cued off electrical activity?
I didn't say none of this cued off electrical activity.
There's no.
I said none of it is related to seeing autorhythmic cell depolarization. It's all contractile cell depolarization. And I didn't say anything about actin and myosin, or whether or not they're doing a power couple. That's completely different, right?
Just the electricity, not the
We're
muscle
just looking at the
contraction.
electrical activity, the membrane potential of the contractile cells, not what's happening inside the contractile cells, which is where the actual contraction would take place. Contraction is independent of membrane potential. We look at this and we hope a contraction follows, right? My contraction, this is not where my contraction happens, right? This isn't where my contraction happens. My contraction happens here. After the electrical, this is the depolarization of the membrane. This is the actin and myosin action coupling and creating my power strip, right? Whether or not I have this contraction or not is independent of whether or not I have depolarization. So I can have the depolarization, electrical activity, but not have the actual resulting contraction of the actin and myosin, and therefore I have pulseless, because I'm not getting the contraction of electrical activity. I'm getting the glare. Watch. Okay, what's this that I just drew?
T-tubule.
Thank you. Okay. So there's my T-tubule, right? This is
SR.
my SR. Down here, these are actin and myosin, which is based on this calcium, right?
Correct.
This calcium has to come out to cause this contraction.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Right here, I have to have an opening of some sort of an ion channel, and for a contractile cell, what ion is it?
Sodium.
Sodium that comes in, that then causes more sodium channels to come in, all the way down the T-tubule, right?
Yes.
All this sodium that's coming in, right?
Yes.
That is my EKG. This electrical activity right here is that. Whether or not my calcium comes out or not is independent. If I have a problem with my calcium here, my last channel has to be a calcium channel to cause my calcium-induced calcium release of the SR, right?
Right.
If that doesn't happen, or if something is affecting this, or I have a drug that is causing a disruption here, or I have a problem with my calcium ATPase pump and can't get the calcium pumped back in, or I have a problem with my sodium potassium ATPase pump and I can't reset myself here, I won't get a contraction. That won't happen. If I don't get that, I won't feel a pulse. But that's independent of this, which is the electrical activity that collectively makes up my EKG. Does that make sense? Two different things. One that leads to the other, but they aren't the same. Right? You're on to this? You're good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay, so let's come back to this. Depending on where number 2 actually is, will determine if we see any antegrade P activity whatsoever, right? Because it could be that you see a little bit, because it does take a little bit longer, because there's more cells for it to get through this direction than that direction. So it could be that you see a little bit of an antegrade P wave tucked up against it, like Mark suggested. depending on where you fit in there, if it's just a slight bit closer here so that the delay north is just a skosh longer, it could be set so that just statistically, we don't see any P wave to begin at all, and the P wave's just buried inside the QRS almost entirely. That's a possibility too.
But your QRS segment would be a normal segment,
Correct? Because why?
because once it hits the bundle of this, everything's normal.
Because once it hits the bundle of this, everything's the way it's supposed to be, right? Do we agree? Melanie, you had a question. Did we get it answered?
Yeah, there's, yeah.
Are you sure? Are you positive?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm positive.
Okay. So then, my next question was, here is my pacemaker.
Where is
So now my question is, the pacemaker is at the bottom of the AV node or within the bundle itself?
So you'll have a slight delay once it fires to get through the EKG fibers and bundle of this and all that. Then you're gonna get a QRS, but since the travel signal's
Are you
traveling,
gonna see anything with that delay?
No.
not really, but
Okay, so
if
you
you were to
just
say
don't- okay.
that the signal travels and then there's a small pause, whatever,
Time for travel,
time for travel,
not delay.
not
Just
correct, time for travel, QRS, but the signal going up is gonna be delayed because it has to get through the AV node. And then you're gonna see a post, fancy term that you're gonna tell us in a second, post downward deflection P wave after the QRS.
After the QRS.
Yes.
I think it could be buried in the QRS, the beginning of it buried in the QRS, so the S would be wider, almost look like a wide QRS.
Okay. Other? So
Well, that'll
I'm
depend on
hearing
where it's
this.
at. Yeah.
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 Something like this?
And how much is buried in the QRS or not buried, just depending on exactly where that pacemaker cell is.
Melanie?
I was just thinking that you wouldn't see any of that at all because the ventricle electrical activity would be so strong that you wouldn't see any type of P wave,
At all?
right? Because it would be happening at the
So
same
what's
time.
happening? What's happening right here? Electrically, what's happening right here?
Is that before the T wave?
That's my T wave.
Right, okay. That is the repolarization of the atria.
No, the HO repolarizes in the QRS.
So you're saying the P wave would just be completely inside the QRS?
Yeah, because,
Still.
because the electrical activity is so strong that you can't see in a normal EKG, the repolarization of the atria.
Okay, so.
Are you
what's
accounting for the
happening right
delay
here?
though?
Tell me what's happening right after this fires. What's going on with the electrical activity?
It's going both directions.
It's going both directions. What is this way going to initiate?
QRS.
Is
What is this, what's gonna happen this direction?
delay.
P wave eventually, but
Delay,
the
then
delay first.
Good, so,
reverse of
let me draw again. So this direction, I should have a QRS complex, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I should have my QRS complex. This direction, I've got a delay going on. So starting right there, I have a delay. Yes?
Yes.
While my QRS complex is happening, I have a delay. But at some point in time, my QRS complex ends, right? What's happening at the delay?
After the delay, P wave fire is shown.
Good. So you're right that the QRS would far exceed what a P wave would be, but the timing is off, right? We've got the QRS happening, but the P wave isn't happening at the same time, because why?
It's delayed.
Because it's being delayed by having to go back to this AV node again. So the P wave doesn't happen right then. P wave will happen later. Does that make sense?
That P wave can shift left or right depending on
Where the delay is.
So we have a P wave here that comes after the QRS complex, so it's called what?
That's some fancy term. Post.
It's- You took medical terminology, what's
I
it
don't
called?
remember. Retrograde.
What happens when, what'd you say?
Retrograde.
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 It's a retrograde P wave. If the first one's antegrade, then it's a retrograde, right?
I just have to use my brain. Give me a second.
Retroperitoneal, retrograde. Okay, so we've got a retrograde P wave that's going on here. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Now,
Could it be buried in the S?
yeah, so,
Okay.
so what we have going on here now is I've asked you to draw, I've asked for 3 examples, right? I've only asked for 3 examples. But it could be anywhere within that spectrum. We could have it, closer up to here, so there is not as much delay, and the P wave is tucked closer into that QS complex. So maybe it looks like we just have a slurred S wave, or a longer S wave than normal, right? Maybe it's tucked down here a little bit into the bundle of His further. So the delay is a little bit longer because we had a little bit of transit time, then we have the delay, and that P wave might be off just a little bit more, right? It all depends on exactly where those pacemaking sites actually began. Good? Needless to say, we have a PR interval that is short or non-existent. We have a QRS complex that is,
Inverted into.
we have a
Or
QRS
QR, sorry.
complex that is
Normal.
normal,
Ish.
normal, or explained away because of a hidden P wave, either antegrade or retrograde. Does that make sense? And now we've defined what a junctional complex is going to look like. We've defined what a junctional complex is going to look
Can you
like.
say that again?
Yes. We have a normal QRS complex. We have P activity, but with a very short PR interval or a non-existent PR interval if we can't tell. That activity is either antegrade or retrograde or non-existent altogether. Therefore, our QS complex might have a slight difference to it in its look, but can be explained away because of either an antegrade or retrograde P wave that's involved.
So no P wave, but a narrow QRS would be junctional.
That's correct. Or an antegrade flipped P wave with a PR interval that's extraordinarily short
Right.
and a normal QRS would be junctional.
Yeah, no, that one's too.
Or a normal QRS complex with a slightly slurred S wave or a retrograde P wave and a short PR interval. A short RP interval, because the P's coming after the R now, would then also denote a junctional rhythm.
So you would always have a negative deflection of a P wave in junctional
You gotta finish that comment.
And leads what?
and lead 2.
Thank you.
Correct.
Assuming
Wrong
the
looking,
person
upside
is
down.
normal.
It's always, in lead 2, it's always upside down.
It'll be flipped in lead 2, assuming that person has normal physiology beyond what's going on here. Right? Questions here? Okay, and Annalise, you said something very important that we discussed right over here about junctional stuff and timing, and that is what? The QRS complexes will come
Oh, slower.
slower, right? So if this is, if the AV node is becoming the pacemaker, the junction is becoming the pacemaker, and we take out sympathetic or parasympathetic involvement for just a minute, that inherent firing of the AV node is slower than that of anything else, right? So if we take out any other influences in the AV node will fire slower. So what is that firing?
40-60?
40-60?
Good. So if we see any of these complexes in combination with a rate that is somewhere between 40 to 60, then we will call that what?
Junctional.
We'll call that a junctional rhythm. That's right.
Or just for posterity, can you write down the intrinsic rates again on board?
No, but you can. What's the intrinsic rate of the SA node? 90 to 100. What is it of the atrial pathways and the atria? 60 to 80. What is it with the AV node and the bundle of His,
40 to 60.
40 to 60, and what is it in the ventricles?
20 to 30.
20 to 40. Good. Okay, if I have these complexes, and I can tell, and my rate is greater than 100, then I have what?
Junctional tach.
A junctional tach. On Thursday, I'm going to give you more than just junctional tach. But today, we'll just stop at junctional tach for that. Okay, so that's fantastic. But what happens if my rate is 82? Good. So if I have the 60 to 100 range, then I have what's called an accelerated junctional rhythm. It's not a junctional tach because it's not above 100, but it's not the normal firing rate of the junction either. It's faster than that, so we say it's an accelerated junctional rhythm. Make sense? What happens if I have a normal sinus rhythm? A normal sinus rhythm, but one of the complexes somewhere in the middle is one of these complexes, and when I caliper it out, I note that that complex has come after it was supposed to. Do you want me to say that again?
Please.
Yes.
Can you draw it?
Sure. I'll draw it this way. I have normal QRSs are my blue ones. The red one is one that looks like this. And it came after it was supposed to.
Escape. Didn't come before.
So what's it called?
Junctional pause.
What's it called?
Junctional escape.
There you go. In this case, I have a junctional escape beat.
Is that a sinus rhythm, a junctional escape? Is that how you break it?
Yes, I said this is a normal sinus rhythm, or you say it's a sinus rhythm with one junctional escape. Make sense?
Does that rate have to be slow enough, somewhere between 40 and 60 for that junctional
We
to come
commonly
in?
see escape beats in slower rhythms, yes, but we don't have to. What happens if I still see my normal sinus rhythm?
Are we assuming all those QRS complexes are coming in the same, like, regularly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I said it was a normal sinus rhythm.
Okay.
So let's say I have the exact same thing. I have a normal sinus rhythm, but I have one of these complexes that comes in here.
Premature
So this would
junctional.
be a premature junctional complex. Does that make sense? And you have your junctional rhythms.
So you make a count.
Good. Questions on that? Okay? Today in lab, and tomorrow morning in lab, and tomorrow in lab, all day tomorrow, one of the stations, you're gonna work with me on EKG analysis too, by the way. We're gonna start applying this.
Can we also, at some point, pull all the monitors out and just go through the differences of monitors and functionality of them?
You are welcome to do that anytime you want
With
to.
somebody that knows how to work them?
Is there something wrong with them?
No, I'm just talking about making sure that we know what buttons to push at the right times.
Push the shock button when you're ready to shock.
Some of the monitors, I believe it's one of the zone monitors, whenever we hook it up to the chicken heart and we go to shock someone, it changes the lead, the viewable lead.
Yeah, that's an
every time.
automatic function of that machine.
Okay, and then there's another one that doesn't let us essentially capture.
That's because the monitors are smart enough to read whether or not you're looking at someone real versus not, because you have to hook the pads up when you want to shock somebody. Some of them will only monitor through the pads themselves and not through themselves. That's a manufacturing issue.
Okay.
We good here?
In our little packets, what do you want us to do with them? In terms of recognize, like, we can identify rate, we can identify some of these rhythms.
Uh-huh.
Do you want us to just go through and do that first and use your pen?
I do now.
Okay.
Now that we're starting to get there, which is what we're gonna start doing in lab today, so you'll see exactly what I want you to do
Okay.
from here on out. Yeah, now's the time for you to start analyzing as many of these as possible. Practicing what we know. Okay, questions with this so far? Yes, no?
Sorry, this might be a little, what kind of rhythm stuff is gonna be on the final?
Nope, I'm not talking about the test right now.
Okay.
I'll talk about the test later. I don't
Good
care
try.
about tests, I care about this.
Good try.
We good so far? Yes,
When are
ma'am?
we gonna talk about amplitude?
What about amplitude? Like what amplitude means in a given place? Down the road after we get past rhythm analysis and we start talking about now, how do you tell if there's hypertrophy? Or how do you tell if there are some of these other events?
Why
that
can't
are-
we talk about that now?
We're gonna learn that independent rhythm first.
Baby steps.
How important is that really?
Keeping it frustrated.
Okay, so we have junctional rhythms, accelerated junctional rhythms, and junctional tach. Then we have junctional escape beats and premature junctional complexes as well.
Are we gonna be able to look at what's causing that?
Yeah, I hope so. So what could cause a premature junctional contraction?
Drugs.
Drugs, good. Hey!
Oh, God dang it.
Some of you just had a PJC instead of a PAC.
Losers.
We haven't even discussed the fact that a few of you had a PVC instead. We're not there yet.
Let's do it, let's jump straight to that.
It's
You
all,
even knew it was gonna happen.
it's all where the excitement was when where your heart was. When
Some of you might have had a PJC before I yelled because you knew it was gonna happen.
That's just.
Isn't that amazing? Physiology in work. It's incredible.
It's insane.
It is, isn't it?
We should all wear
Blows my
monitors.
mind.
All the things that can cause a PAC can cause a PJC, right? Because it just depends on which of the tissue in your heart got excited in that moment, right? If you're, what are you drinking?
Seltzer.
Oh, that's too bad. Who's got coffee? Oh, right back there.
I'm off coffee.
Chad takes a drink of his Monster? Rockstar. Takes a drink of his Rockstar back there. He very well may have a PVC or a PJC or a PAC. Who knows? It just depends on where the caffeine happened to hit. It also could be that he's so caffeinated that doesn't happen at all. He's past that point.
It's hitting every part of his heart.
I'm that guy.
Well, it's in a given moment, right? So now you have it. So we've got junctional rhythms, accelerated junctional rhythms, junctional tach, PJC, escape beat. I am going to change our junctional tachs on Thursday to be more specific. There are a couple of very specific ones that we see, AV nodal reentry tachycardia and AV nodal tachycardia, which are a little bit different, and you'll help to define where we're going to see those. But for right now, I'm just interested, in the next couple of days, I'm just interested in you taking a look at junctional rhythms themselves. Yes?
Is there such a thing as like a decelerated junctional rhythm, like where it's less than? 40?
Something that is going slower than that? No, we really don't have to find it slower than that. We just will call it a junctional rhythm.
Are
and
you
give the
gonna
rate.
cause an accelerated junctional rhythm if you're trying to correct their Brady?
You could, yeah. So if they've got symptomatic bradycardia and the underlying rhythm that they have is a junctional rhythm, and you give them atropine, depending on what's the problem up above, if the problem up above still exists and you just take that junctional rhythm and speed it up, you can put them into an accelerated junctional rhythm, which is what we're trying to do, right? Anyway, because we're trying to increase blood pressure there. And whether or not we have any other activity that comes from that completely depends on what was causing the upper supraventricular sites to go offline in the first place. Right? Questions so far?
You'd never have a junctional Brady, would you? You wouldn't call it that. It's a silly question.
No, but a junctional rhythm, by definition,
Is it Brady?
is a bradycardic rhythm. You don't have to say, this is a bradycardic junctional rhythm. When you call it a junctional rhythm, you've already defined the rate. Otherwise, you'd have said it was accelerated junctional rhythm. Good? Questions on that? Get out your paper. I have a couple more questions for you. Dun, dun, dun. We're still in the junctional realm of some sort. Draw for me, please, like 3 complexes so that I know you have it nailed. Draw for me a situation where a drug has affected the AV node, and that effect has been to close conduction channels in the AV node. They're not all closed, but there's more than usual, a more than usual number of conduction channels that are closed in the AV node.
Is this a sinus rhythm?
This is so we have a normal, we start with the normal sinus rhythm. We started with the normal sinus rhythm, and nothing has happened to any of the arrhythmic cells themselves. But there's a drug that's affecting the AV node, and what it is doing is it is closing more of the conduction channels in the AV node. There are less conduction channels in the AV node, but they are consistent.